Hey, Romanus.
Hello, Davis.
How are you doing this week?
A lot better than I thought I would have been if you told me a few months ago that Trump was going to be president.
Yeah, so we should address the elephant in the room here.
Should we?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
what a apt expression.
I don't know. I don't know if we need to be honest. I mean,
What is there to say?
I know. I think I'm on day 3 now since it's happened, where I'm just kind of in this processing state.
Mm-hmm.
And because both you and I are like less than a year away from hitting 30, I'm just at that point in life where I'm like, what the fuck ever, man. Like, of course. I'm like, I want to just be like, who cares? But it's something that should concern people, particularly people like us in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm just in that state of mind where the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Well, I will say that this go around was less shocking than 2016.
I agree.
And I agree with you. Growing up, when I would see older black men in my family and outside of my family and see how sort of indifferent and ambivalent they were, it kind of bothered me because it'd be like, there's all of this racism and shit going on and you're not upset. But now I have gotten to that point where I'm a little more, I just have adopted a not give a fuck attitude and just sort of put your head down and work. But also, I do understand that a part of the reason why Trump won is because there's just a lot of voter apathy, and so
Especially from the Democratic Party this
right,
year.
yeah, and it's amongst black men particularly. So for not that black men are the reason that Trump won.
Oh, definitely not.
But right, like we just don't have the numbers for that to even be true. But doing it all over again, of course, I would vote for Kamala. 4 years from now, I'm gonna vote Democrat. Until I die, I'm gonna vote Democrat because it's just never gonna make sense for me to vote conservative. I'm not wealthy, and
it just doesn't align with your principles or sensibilities.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very much so. And so many people today just don't really know what to do anymore, and they've lost track of the rules of how to play the game. And all of this dysfunction has led us to where we are now.
But you just have to keep going. Like
Exactly. I mean, we're going to see what happens.
Yeah. I have had, in spite of everything, kind of a nice week just because I am okay to reset my expectations of people. Like now I don't have to really interact with these people who aren't going to vote with their conscience, which is totally fine. We don't have to talk to each other. We don't have to be around each other. And I like Wednesday night, I got together with some friends. We sat down, discussed our thoughts, and got to laugh a little.
Yeah.
And just say, you know what, fuck it.
It's the best thing you can do right now.
That's the best thing you can do. And also, right, not to be... I know I've said I've become apathetic, but you can't always give in. Like, eventually, there will be another election, and I still have to show up.
Yep. I mean, we got to get through these next 4 years, and it could be tough for many, many people. But you know what? We just got to synthesize, and we got to stand together ultimately.
Keep your head above water.
Pretty much. Sink or swim. So, here we are. Back in the studio. We're finally getting back to talking about more recent movies after a couple months of just doing a lot of horror retrospectives, and we did that Hitch review. We didn't do much for the last couple months, but I'm very excited to get back into talking about some more recent stuff, and this one in particular that we'll be talking about today is something I've been looking forward to all year. So we're going to go into it. My name is Davis Leaf. This is the Loose Leaf Media Podcast. I'm here with my co-host.
Ro.
That's Ro. And today we're going to be talking about Sean Baker's new film, Anora, which I saw a week ago, late on Halloween night, and you saw last...
I just saw last night.
You saw last night. And I have a lot of thoughts on this film, and I believe you do as well. And we're just looking forward to talking about this one. So
I can read a short summary.
Please.
Anora, a young sex worker from Brooklyn, meets and impulsively marries the son of a Russian oligarch. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened as his parents set out for New York to get the marriage annulled.
And lots of hijinks ensues from that.
Oh, man.
Lots of slapstick stuff. And
yeah.
So, yeah, I've seen many critics kind of define this movie as like a revisionist Cinderella story in a lot of ways too.
I could see
and
that.
I see that, but I never really, like, when I walked away from this movie, that wasn't kind of like the main description that I kind of felt this movie qualified as. And to be totally honest, it's really hard to define this movie in a lot of ways. It is as simple as that summary that you just read states, but it's the execution that elevates every single element of this movie. And so how familiar are you with Sean Baker as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I've seen one of his movies, The Florida Project.
Yes, that one did very well
Yeah.
when that came out. I believe that was the first one of his that I watched several years ago. But I didn't see it when it came out. But I know that Willem Dafoe was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in that movie. And to this day, it's one of my favorite Willem Dafoe performances.
And I think one of the best child performances in a movie I've ever seen.
Like all of the kids in that film are spectacular.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we can go into a background here, but I wanted to read this short paragraph on the Wikipedia page that kind of emphasizes his style and influences and what he represents in filmmaking today. So, Sean Baker has established a reputation for portraying outcasts and characters from underrepresented and marginalized subcultures, frequently undocumented immigrants and sex workers, in decidedly humane and compassionate scenarios. He claims to have been directly inspired by exploitation films, but has been described as an archetype of a trustworthy male director in post-Me Too era. His films have stirred and encouraged a debate about sexual morality. And I think that is a very, very good description for all of the films of his that I have seen. And he's done more films preceding the ones that I have seen, but a lot of the ones that I've seen are some of his bigger hitters. So in 2015, he did a film called Tangerine. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen it, but I know about it.
Yeah, it's great. I rewatched all of his films, all of the ones that I have seen leading up to Anora over the last couple of months. And that movie's just basically about this transgender prostitute in Los Angeles who finds out that she gets out of jail and she finds out that her pimp boyfriend has been cheating on her. And so she just kind of goes on like a revenge quest throughout the streets of LA looking for him with her friend, who is also a transgender sex worker. And it's great. It's a fun kind of journey movie. It's really funny. It's got a ton of heart to it, like all of his movies. But that was kind of like just the start, it felt like, of him ramping up to do crazier and crazier things in his movie. But that movie is very unique because it's shot with iPhones, and it's got that like, I don't know how to describe the look of like an iPhone, but like it feels very modern for that reason. Sure. It feels like you were following along on somebody's IG story almost, and it's really good for that reason. But after that, he followed up a couple years later with The Florida Project, which is, just a really good look at, people that are the underclass kind of living in this rundown motel that's just like a mile away from Disney World. And it's kind of got that like forbidden fruit element to it where, all of these people that are not making any money, are paying rent in this motel, the motel that's run by Willem Dafoe's character. And it takes the entire perspective of these children and the lives of them just kind of having fun, goofing around, and not really concerning themselves with the day-to-day distresses that their parents are actually facing. But their parents are also trying to kind of do the same thing with just trying to get by on a day-to-day basis. But it's taking place off the backdrop of the Disney World Resort. And it's beautiful for that reason. I think it's an incredible movie, and I've seen that one a few times, and every time that movie gets better, just from its visual elements, its acting, the production design of it all. He does Sean Baker is also kind of been known for a lot of color symbolism and location scouting, like highlighting particular locations in a lot of his films. I love really cool insert shots of them, and I love that kind of stuff. It's very gorgeous and it's very beautiful. But a few years ago, he followed up The Florida Project, which with what I would think is maybe my favorite film of his, but Anora might beat it with more viewings. Red Rocket, which stars Simon Rex, Dirt Nasty. If you know, do you know him? He's a rapper.
Okay, Dirt Nasty.
Yeah, you definitely know this guy.
Do I?
Have you ever seen Scary Movie 3?
Yeah.
He's the main character, the rapper guy from Scary Movie 3.
I mean, rapper names these days, you could tell me anything and I believe you. Little Fucky.
He's kind of retired that name for himself and just straight goes by Simon Rex.
Nasty?
Dirt Nasty.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know this guy. The white guy.
Yeah.
Okay. This guy's named Dirt Nasty?
Yeah, that was his rapper name.
Oh, God. Better off being Lil Fucky.
Yeah, well, probably, to be honest. But he's the lead of Red Rocket. And for starters, I think he gives one of the greatest performances of the decade so far. He is absolutely spectacular in this movie. But it follows him as he's returning back to his hometown in Texas after kind of being thrown out of LA because he's a washed up porn star. And he's just trying to make things right with his wife and trying to find an angle to get himself back into the pornographic film industry at the same time.
Right.
And he's a shitty human being. He's just a terrible person that's just taking advantage of everybody around him. And it almost kind of has this Uncut Gems feel to it, where you're just kind of watching this horrible person continue to dig themselves deeper and deeper into a hole. And there's a lot of, I don't want to give away too much about this movie, but there's a lot of like ethical questions about his behaviors in the film, which are pretty apparent when you watch the movie. But there's also a lot of heart to this film as well. Again, it's shot beautifully. Sean Baker does his own editing for all of his films, so it's edited very well. And there's also a lot of political commentary in this because it's taking place right before the 2016 election. And it's in Texas, so you see a lot of like background imagery of Trump support, and you see the characters just kind of sitting there watching Trump give speeches at his rallies on the TV, but you don't actually see the TV. And it's brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff in Red Rocket. You would like this movie, I think. But that movie did very well that year too, but didn't get a ton of recognition. But it was one of the top films to receive the Palme d'Or award at the Cannes Film Festival, which would eventually be won by the movie we're going to talk about, Sean Baker's latest film, Anora.
Yes, we've been waiting with bated breath to hear how you feel about Anora, Davis. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I've already kind of given an indication that I thought the movie was terrific and easily one of my favorite movies of the year. And I'm going to highly encourage everybody go and check this film out. But I, more than anything, from somebody less introduced to Sean Baker's filmography, but who definitely has an idea of his style, I would like to know more about what you think.
Yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. And it's one of those movies that I haven't stopped thinking about at all. It's just been it's one of those movies where you see its Rotten Tomatoes score and it right now has 97%. I completely agree.
It deserves it.
Yeah. It hit me in a place emotionally where I thought it couldn't. And I went into the movie clean. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, I didn't know much about it either.
I knew that it was supposed to be a comedy, and for a significant portion of the movie, it does deliver on the laughs. It's a very funny movie. But
there's like a turning point when the second act kind of
Oh
starts.
my God,
that it just
yeah.
goes for like an hour.
Yes.
Straight hijinks, just slapstick style
Yeah.
comedy, and it is so fucking funny.
But for about an hour, I would say I was laughing the entire time.
Same.
And then the third act is a complete gut punch. It wraps everything together in
That
a
last
bow tie.
half an hour of the movie.
Breathtaking.
Yeah, which
And-
we're gonna include a spoiler section for this
Yes.
movie because there's a lot of like fine details that you don't really want to give away too much because that would ruin the entire experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, that third act, the film has a weird structure to it where it starts off as kind of like a romantic dramedy for the first 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
And then it just divulges into complete off the rails controlled chaos. And then the last hour is just the last like 30 minutes is like straight drama.
It's sobering. This movie, I was sitting in the theater for maybe 15 minutes after, like the employees are cleaning up in the theater, and I'm still sitting down thinking about what I've seen from this main character, who is Annie / Anora, and she is a sex worker, like stripper, and one night she is at work at a strip club called Headquarters HQ, and she runs into this client who is a just really wealthy guy. He's throwing this ton of money around, and they take a liking to each other. Like, he finds her really attractive and sexy, and she likes that he has a lot of money, and they just begin on this romance until and she starts off pretty hesitant to give her heart away, but she falls in love with the money. She falls in love with the lifestyle. We see that she, she's not homeless, right? She's living with her sister, but she isn't wealthy. And it's a dream come true when she has the attention of this really wealthy guy, and he lives in this fancy mansion, and
he gets to take her trips around the country,
right?
And just party and have a good time and live.
Buy her clothes, just live,
and like when you like, there's a really great montage scene of like her like finally kind of adjusting to their relationship because he kind of offers her this opportunity to like stay with him at first for like a small period of time, to see how they connect, and there's a montage that follows that of them just going around doing all of these fun activities together, and then you just see her look genuinely happy. And it's like anybody would feel that way too. It's just like you get to go from rags to riches almost in this way. And of course you're going to be happy. You're going to enjoy this lifestyle. You get to do whatever you want, and you don't really have to do much.
Just in general, sex workers are not looked upon very fondly by society.
No.
Even though a lot of people employ sex workers.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of people don't reveal that component because, of the stigmatization. But that's, I think, what is so brilliant about what Sean Baker does in most of his films is he attempts to try and destigmatize the opinions of sex work. And he's always been very good at it, but I just think he continues to get better and better at making that point to where Anora feels like a culmination of everything that he's been trying to do and say in his career as a filmmaker.
And it's done excellently. This is a 25-year-old woman, and so she's vaping, she's got little streams in her hair, she's got this heavy makeup. Like she's a stripper, so she has to be lively. She has this there's a scene where she's talking to one of her friends outside of the strip club that they both work at, and it's a conversation that would just kill my brain cells. But it's a real conversation,
exactly,
right? Like
because it all feels genuine, and because of his editing, he doesn't linger on things like that too. He just gives you a good picture of a quick picture of who these people are, how they communicate with each other, how they act, and it makes it feel like these are real people. Like you'll literally walk down a Brooklyn street outside of a strip club, and you'll see these people having this actual conversation,
and not even just that. These are just 25-year-old women that live in New York that could have this conversation at outside of a strip club or even outside of a bank where they both work at, you know.
And his editing just gives it that slice of life almost feel to it, where it's just like, again, these are real people. You're walking down the street, you just hear this conversation happening, you keep walking, but that's just how it goes. And he just gives you those slices of like, these are just people. They're just chilling, having normal conversations and conversations that sound real for their age. And that carries over throughout the entire movie too. Until the film kind of transitions when at the start of the second act to feeling like things are under control in a specific way too, where everything is erupting and becoming very chaotic, and the editing becomes a lot more chaotic for that reason. Where it's just it's so fucking funny too. It's hilarious.
Well, the editing does change significantly after the first act, because
even the cinematography does. Because there's an entire like extended scene. It's the first scene when things start to go off the rails, and it's all taking place in this house, and that scene goes on for like 30 minutes or so, and there's not a ton of editing or quick cuts. There's a lot of wide or like master frames of everything happening in the same scene. So like the blocking is just completely on point for how it happens, and it feels like real time almost.
It does. And what you mentioned about that slice of life moment in the first act, right, and how it contrasts to the second act and then going forward into the movie, that first act being very choppy, it's just a fast-paced life as a stripper in New York, where she's going from client to client, right, and then she's in the VIP room, or she's just in the bar area where she's trying to meet a new client, or she's in the back room with the other sex workers talking about life and other BS, or she's outside with her friends smoking a cigarette talking shit about clients. Like just like it's so choppy, but you kind of love it because it's just life.
It's a natural progression for how people behave in real life. It's like we see Anora on the job, we see her in the back room getting ready for the job, we see her outside taking a break with her friend, and like the demeanor is different every single time for the character. And a lot of credit has to be given to Mikey Madsen's performance,
who plays Anora.
Which is it's probably the best performance by a woman I've seen this year. Like, a lot of people are predicting her to be nominated and even win the Oscar for Best Actress, and I actually think it's highly possible.
She should.
She is incredible in this movie.
She is. There are moments when she can be the sexy woman who makes a man feel powerful, like a lot of sex workers have to. Then there is the broke girl that's like, I have no time for your BS. Like, I need to work. There's that steadfast component of her too, where she's like buying into this lifestyle as well too, and wants to maintain it for herself. But when it's in jeopardy, she becomes very fierce. And like, she's gonna fight for it. And for starters, Mikey Madsen, she did a lot of prep work for this movie. She was actually discovered by Sean Baker for her scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he would go, and that's the moment that apparently he knew that he wanted to cast her in this role. And because he'd been working on this movie for quite a while. And then he continued to be impressed by her from her role in Scream 5, which I know you haven't seen that one. No.
But both of those movies have something in common. They both... No spoilers for Scream 5, but her character gets lit on fire in that movie, and that's her character's death in Scream 5. Similarly to how she gets lit on fire at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And so I was like, I barely recognized her in Anora without being lit on fire.
Spoilers for Anora. Anora does not get lit on fire.
Anora does not get lit on fire, but she's fired up throughout a lot of this movie.
My goodness.
And it's pretty great. But So for those performances, Sean Baker was very inspired to cast her in this movie. And she learned Russian. She did all of her own stunts in this movie. And she took several dance classes. And this is like, you can see the prep work on full display to the point it's like, if any of her work before this wasn't a breakout performance, this one definitely is. To the point where it's like, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of her and hearing a lot more about her over the next 10 years.
Yeah. I'm also going to give another shout out because she does give a great performance. I completely agree. But I think a performance that may go underrated is from her lover, Mark Edelstein.
The Russian Timothy Chalamet.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, that's in Russia. That's how he's dubbed. Is the Russian Timothy Chalamet?
I mean, I guess that's a compliment. Yeah. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know what that's gonna do for his career. But
I don't know either.
Have fun.
And I wonder if he showed up. Did you know that there was a Timothy Chalamet lookalike contest?
Yes, yeah, I did see that.
I wonder if he showed up for that.
Well, but you know who did show up to that contest?
Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah. It reminds me of that story where Dolly Parton showed up to a drag Dolly Parton lookalike show, and she lost.
That's funny.
Yeah, she had a good sense of humor about it.
I'm sure. Yeah, that would actually be funny to me. I'm not the best version of myself. What does that prove?
Yeah, but Mark Edelstein plays Ivan, who is the son of this Russian oligarch, and who sweeps Annie off of her feet and eventually marries her. And he is just a really spoiled kid that has a ton of money that isn't his, but is still able to spend it and throw it around.
And it's supposed to be like he's in America studying.
Yeah.
And he's just partying and being lazy all day.
Doing drugs, playing video games, having sex with a sex worker.
Just living life. He's like, what, 21 or something?
Yeah, 21.
Yeah, his character's supposed to be about 21. He's just living life off the wealth of his own family. Yeah. Which a lot of that, there's a lot of background details about Ivan and Annie that are kept like ambiguous throughout the movie, which I actually really appreciate. There's like a moment where Ivan kind of reveals some information about his family and his background, and he shows something to Annie on his phone to highlight that, and we never see it. So we never get like immediate clarification of like what his family does, right? Like how they acquired all of their wealth, right? And what his role in all of that is supposed to really be.
But they're famous enough where there's a picture of his father on Google, just with a quick Google search, and there's also a picture of him and Ivan and his siblings. So they have to have a ton of fame in order to be that searchable on a search engine.
Yeah. And even on Annie's side too, like they have a couple brief conversations about like her parents and things like that, but she doesn't go into much detail about like how she feels about them, what their dynamic is, but they're clearly just not in the picture.
Well, she doesn't talk about her father. She says that her mother lives in Miami, but her and her sister live in New York. And like we see her sister, the relationship with her sister, but only for
it's like one scene,
yeah.
And that's why a lot of it feels so slice of life, because we're just kind of jumping into these people's lives as they're happening, and we're seeing how this particular scenario plays out for them.
The other thing I did want to mention about Ivan is that even though he is really immature and has a very privileged life, and just childish, and for a lot of people that'd be a turnoff, there's a lot of subtle chivalry that he has where like he will, like there was one scene where they're walking up these stairs and he's just running up like a really excited kid, and he looks back to Annie, he says, "Oh, I'm walking ahead of you, I'm sorry." And just
there's like when the third act kind of highlights more of that, where it comes from, it's like he's clearly a mama's boy too. Yeah. So I would expect some of those qualities of him to have been inherited from his mother's teachings, but at the same time, there's a point in the third act where he kind of abandons all of those things.
I mean, I would say at the beginning of the second act.
I think the funny thing is, it's like, despite those qualities, he's kind of like the villain of the story in a lot of ways too.
1000%, yes.
And I want to give a huge shout out to Karen Karagulian, who plays Torres in the movie.
Man,
And
I wanted to get to that.
I know, right? Because if Mikey Madsen is in line to get a Best Actress nomination at the Oscars, as she should, and should probably win, I would love to see him get a Best Supporting Actor nomination. He does so much for this film. A lot of it is humor related, but he's just the cleaner, he's the guy that is just meant to come and fix the situation, and watching him struggle to get everything back together and restitch the pieces of this completely broken situation is crazy. It's funny, and this guy does such a good job at just showing all of his anxiety and frustration in this situation.
Let's give some background. Toros is a person who watches over Ivan and actually works and is employed by Ivan's Russian parents. And so Ivan's parents are in Russia, but Toros is responsible for being Ivan's guardian, essentially.
He's like he's his godfather, technically.
Yeah. And so, but godfather in quotes, but really he is employed by Ivan's
He's
parents.
a supervisor.
Exactly.
Just like you said, his guardian in the States.
And basically wiping Ivan's ass and nose.
Just cleaning up all of his messes.
Yes.
Just making sure he doesn't get himself into any major media trouble.
And the real second act starts with Toros getting a phone call from Ivan's mother about a rumor that Ivan is married to their words,
prostitute.
A prostitute. Their words, not mine. But
we don't do that.
No.
We support sex work
exactly.
here. Yes, of course. Well, I mean, technically,
not that there's anything wrong with that.
Absolutely.
My father's a sex worker.
That's good for him, and he voted for Trump. That's impressive.
Exactly.
Yeah. The new colloquial term, I think, is mattress actress.
Wait, what?
In some circles,
Ivan's wow. Not my circle.
Not yet.
My goodness. Well, not that
there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Like, open up your circle a little bit more.
Exactly. Maybe I should.
Maybe you should.
Even Ivan's dad, who has maybe 4 lines in this movie because he's a beaten down man.
God!
And we'll get to that.
I can't wait to talk about a third act moment.
Which we'll probably hold for the spoiler.
Yeah, we're holding a lot of the fine details for the spoilers.
But Ivan's dad calls Annie a night butterfly, which I kind of liked. Like, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. Yeah. But anyway,
I've never heard that one before.
I never have either. Maybe it's a Russian thing.
It makes sense. When you really think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah. Very, very cute.
Yeah.
But no, probably better than Mattress Actress.
Probably.
Yeah.
A little bit more subtle.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. No, but Toros, man, that guy.
My goodness.
I think he is one of the greatest comedic performances I've ever seen in a movie, and I love comedy, man.
He has a role in Tangerine as well.
Which
I was very shocked to see him in this movie because I didn't expect it. But there's another background actor who had a role in Red Rocket, but not the point. He has a major supporting role in Tangerine as well, and he's fantastic in this. This eclipses that performance so much. He is so fucking
yeah.
I might have to agree with you on his performance. It might be one of the funniest performances I've ever seen. There's a particular line delivery that we'll get into in the spoiler section too that I really want to highlight. But he's so good in this movie.
In the first act, I didn't laugh much. There were some moments where I would chuckle at Ivan's naivete.
Yeah. And like you said, there's some of those conversations that like Annie's just having on a break or with some of her friends, they're laughable moments. And Ivan's naivete, definitely.
But the moments of Toros trying to reason with Annie to convince her to annul the marriage of her marriage with Ivan and to maybe not to even reason with Ivan, man. My stomach was hurting.
Same. And in his dynamics too with his 2 goons that he brings and just trying to get them under control.
Oh my god.
Literal comedy gold for just an hour straight in this movie.
And there aren't any actual jokes that there aren't.
No, it's all
punchlines.
circumstantial. It's all just like happening in the moment, and
Yeah.
it's the chaos, it's the chaotic energy of what's going on that makes it so funny, because this movie never abandons this very naturalistic approach.
Yeah, it reminds me of this one movie called Midnight Run with Robert De Niro.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it though.
It's a great movie. I love that movie. Yeah. It's another movie where it's a comedy, but doesn't have any setup other than the actual plot. Like there aren't jokes. It's just the chaos that these people are put into, and it just happens to make you laugh.
Because it's absurd.
It is absurd.
It just transitions into complete absurdity.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what the fuck is happening
now?
now?
And the second act of this movie is absurd.
Yeah.
Without getting into too many spoilers, but it occurs when Ivan's parents are on their way. They're not even there yet, but they're on their way to New York, and Annie notices, she just realized that her marriage is in jeopardy. This marriage that, she's got this Russian sable winter coat, and she's got this fat 4-carat ring, and she's in this big mansion, and
so he has a very cold atmosphere to it too.
Yeah,
as it's kind of going along. There's like a couple of scenes where it's snowing, and like I'll kind of get into some of the themes when we get into spoilers too.
Yeah,
but like that cold atmosphere of like even the way the characters are dressed, everybody's got coats on.
Yeah,
throughout like a lot of the second act.
And
it's very good. It's very good details.
Let's get to the third act and then the spoilers after. But the third act begins when Ivan's parents finally arrive to New York, and another just wonderful performance in this movie is played by Ivan's mother, Daria Ekamasova. I know
guess is as good as mine.
Yeah,
a lot of these actors are not that well known to me.
Yeah, which helps.
It does.
Slice of life.
Mikey Madsen is probably the most famous person I know in this movie.
Yeah,
and she's in 2 movies that I really love before this, but beyond that point, I don't know a lot of the history of most of these actors.
No, yeah, Daria, Ivan's mother, Galina, gives a wonderful performance.
She's great, yeah.
As this just very authoritarian mother figure, and when she just comes off of that plane from Russia, she I was expecting a person who works on the airplane to come, just release the door, and then the steps come down, and then they'll make way for the passengers of the plane to get off. No. Who is the one that releases the door? It's Ivan's mother. She's coming down the stairs. Yep. She's got the jacket on her shoulders, and she is walking with authority. And like Taurus is waiting for her, but she beamlines right. She makes a beeline right to Ivan. Yeah. Like she demands respect immediately without saying a word.
And you feel the silence even. I saw this with a pretty large group of people in the theater, and that really enhanced the experience. But yeah, when she gets off that plane, it was the first moment in a while where I felt like this less humorous sense of tension at that point, where I was just like, oh God, things are about to get real again. And yeah, she carries that for sure.
Well, and to be honest with you, the third act is the only moment where I feel actual tension. Like the first act, it just feels like a modern fairy tale / comedic drama. The second act is just a comedy, and then the third act is when the real stakes occur. Yeah, and it just goes to show you, without spoiling too much, that Annie is in a way to use Ivan's dad's words, she is a butterfly caught in a hurricane, and it's that hurricane is this very wealthy, tumultuous family, and she has no say.
She has no say, but she's watching all of this dysfunction unfold in front of her eyes, and she always seems to feel like the most competent person in the room because nobody has a handle on anything going on, and she's just trying to get one thing essentially throughout the entire movie, which is why it's like you can always feel like her thoughts are almost the most collected amongst all of the chaos happening that she's forced to take part in. And so when she's driving around in a car with a lot of these people that she doesn't want to be with, she's just kind of like watching them like, you're all idiots.
Yeah.
All of you are so fucking stupid. And you have the same feeling too as like the viewer.
Yeah.
And it makes it easy. It's so easy to relate to her as a character. And it makes her character also additionally really funny watching this play out in front of her. And she just feels like the only person that is grounded in actual reality.
And she is, but it doesn't matter because they have already made decisions on her based on her being a sex worker.
Her profession and her lifestyle choices.
She's not Russian, and she doesn't speak their language, and she's poor, and they know that, and they don't give a fuck what she says, even if it's 2 + 2 = 4, the sky's blue. It doesn't matter. Her standing doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Even when Ivan realizes that his parents are on their way from Russia to New York, his expression changes because he understands what's at stake. Oh, the real players are coming, and we have to play their game, and they never lose. And the only way I could win was to be in America away from my parents. But now that they're coming, I have to listen. And so does this girl that I just married a week ago. Like there is in Annie's world, she, along with another consenting adult, got married, and so they have a marriage license. They, it's legal. There was no coercion. There's none of that, but it doesn't matter. There's one conversation, and maybe we should get into spoilers eventually, but there's one final conversation between Annie and Ivan's mom that just puts everything into perspective, that crushes Annie's world. And no matter what Annie can say to Ivan's mom, there's nothing.
She'll never gain the affections and never gain the respect.
No,
like she's only seen as one kind of person.
Yeah, it's not that. It's not a romantic comedy. No. This is the real world. Even without all of the even with or without the comedy, it doesn't matter. The truth is, her social standing makes it so that these Russian oligarchs just think that she's lower than low.
Absolutely. And so I'm ready to talk about some spoilers.
Okay, let's get into it.
This movie comes in with we'll transition here. But this movie really comes with my highest recommendation. I think everybody should check this movie out. I mean, maybe not everybody, but most people that enjoy movies, I think, will find a lot of things to enjoy about this movie. I think people should go and see this. I think it's wonderful. I think it's brilliant, and it's got some good things to say. So I think a lot of the bigger themes of this movie kind of has to do with like this, of course, that culmination of controlled chaos that Sean Baker has made a career out of, but this sense of isolation and lonerism in a lot of ways, really, because this is like almost a character study in a lot of ways about Anora and her life and this particular point in her life. And she's kind of a loner, and she gets involved with this very wealthy family, and she still continues to be isolated from all of them. And all of those things that you were just describing in the third act in regards to that exchange between her and Ivan's mother culminates that isolation where she just it's finally hitting home for her where she will never be accepted. She'll never be seen as an equal to any of these people, and she just needs to detach from this group because they're not the same. But it's the fact that she's belittled that makes it so soul-crushing in the end, where it's not just like, our lives are just not going to intersect in this way because we're not compatible. It's simply, we actually just don't view you as an equal.
Yeah.
And that hurts her, and it hurts you as a viewer to see this, because you're rooting for her throughout this movie. You're rooting for her to get hers, to end up on top, because sex work isn't easy.
No.
It's probably one of the, if not the most difficult profession to be a part of. And, if you enjoy components of it, that's great. But, I'm sure that there's a lot of indignities that I'm certain there's a lot of indignities that people suffer from in that industry.
Well, it's, although there are characters that point to Annie being a sex worker as the reason why she can't be married to Ivan, there are moments in the movie where we see that those characters that are judging her do employ sex workers.
Exactly.
So like even Taurus, who has been telling Annie, you can't marry him, you're a prostitute, you're a whore, you're a hooker. And in the movie, when they're trying to locate Ivan because he ran away when he figures out that his parents are coming to New York.
Like, he just abandons Annie to get just like roughed up by these fucking goons.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's just the moment where it snaps for me, where I'm like, oh, this kid. I mean, I never really thought highly of this kid at first, because he's just a lowlife.
He abandons his wife.
Exactly. But like, this girl that he married, he just dips out
Doesn't care.
at the thought, and just like, and then like I throughout that entire section of the movie, I'm thinking, it's like, is he out doing something in particular that's going to help the situation? Nope. No. They just find him back at the HQ strip club, getting another lap dance from a
woman who,
her business, like her rival,
coworker,
rival essentially.
And when they figure out that he's at HQ, Annie gets a text from a friend that says, hey, Ivan is getting a lap dance from this other chick that hates
Diamond.
you. Diamond. Oh, you remember. Oh, but
because she gets brought up so many times in this movie, and like their exchanges are always so funny because they're just in competition with each other.
The stripper names are so simple because Annie's friend is named Crystal and Annie's enemy is named Diamond.
I know.
It's just whatever. But
it's
anyway.
it's almost kind of on the nose though for that reason.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. But when they figure out that Ivan is at HQ, Taurus is like, oh, he's at headquarters? I love that place. But that's out of that. But that's
I can't even hear lines from that section of the movie without laughing.
It happens after he has called Annie a prostitute, hooker, whore, bitch, everything.
Like the constant irony and absurdity of everything in that section of the movie. Just
one of Taurus's henchmen, Garnick, also calling Annie a hooker, whore, all this stuff.
And he's just the dumbest character in this
whole we're going to get to that.
Because we haven't talked about him and we haven't talked about Igor yet.
No, but Garnick, in the background when they're at HQ, is trying to get a hooker's number. He's like walking through the strip club and he's looking at all of the strippers, the sex workers, and he's talking to he's like really getting cozy with the sex worker that was just giving Ivan a lap dance.
Yep.
So their hypocrisy is evident in this movie.
It's on the surface.
Yeah.
When we really start exploring these people just like doing their own personal things, and they get in that environment that they're judging people like Anora so heavily on, it's just like, bro, you're the reason that they're making any money.
Yes.
So who the fuck are you to judge?
Yes.
Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, it's but in society,
it's a societal thing. It's reputational in that reason, because it's like, this family's wealthy, they're very well known, and so they don't want their names to be associated with this type of behavior, which is a very it's a social dilemma in that reason.
Well, there are even more than that. There's a lot of men who watch porn or like just interact with sex work in some way and still hate
Exactly,
workers
and that's where
these women.
and that's where the conversation of hypocrisy just comes from constantly, where it's just like, it's the fucking double standard is the absurdity of that section of the movie.
Yeah,
where it's just like, what are you even talking about in this entire section of the movie? Like, do you hear the words coming out of your mouth? And it's hilarious for that reason, because it's so constantly sarcastic and ironic for that reason.
Well, the other moment that I wanted to talk about, where it's sort of hypocritical, but on the side of the socioeconomic standing, right? Where when Ivan's mom first comes in and sees Ivan for the first time, he's like hungover, he's like slumped over, and just not saying anything.
Yeah.
And Annie takes a moment to try to introduce herself in Russian to Ivan's mom. And Taurus and his henchmen are around. They all speak Russian, and Annie...
And two of them, they're Armenian.
Yeah.
But
Igor's Russian, right.
Yeah.
And so they understand that Annie is trying to introduce herself very pleasantly to her mother-in-law.
She's behaving elegantly.
Yeah. And yet, I guess she speaks very broken Russian, and you see the other characters' reactions when she tries to introduce herself, and they're all like, oh, no, you don't know your place. And Ivan's mom just shuts her down. And it's so relatable. I've been in situations like that where, like, I've met
You tried to speak Russian and
exactly.
Got shot down
Yes,
by
as
a
young sex worker myself. No, but
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I should be congratulated.
You
for
should
it,
be, because there's nothing wrong with that.
There's
no,
of course not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Anyway, so like, so then they're all like, "Why the fuck are you talking? That you have no right. You are less than zero. You have no right to talk to this Russian oligarch woman."
Yeah.
And so they get on the plane, and then Garnick is drunk, and while Ivan and his parents are talking, Garnick, who is closer to proximity to wealth to Annie than these Russian oligarchs, Garnick drunkenly tries to thank Ivan's parents for employing him and say how it's great to finally, meet them and be around them. And Taurus is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, he's drunk, please, get him out. And so, but then Taurus does the exact same thing, but just sober.
Yep.
And Ivan's dad's like, I'm talking with my family. Please, hush away, peasant.
Yep.
And it just, Garnick, Taurus, even though they judged Annie for trying to introduce herself and almost put her...
They get the same reaction ultimately.
They get the same reaction. Because
that's like you said, it's the socioeconomic component of it, where it's like even some people that think that they're in a higher position than another person are absolutely not.
Yes. And Ivan's parents look at all of those people saying, why are you even talking to me? You have no reason to be talking to me or thinking about me unless you're doing something for me.
And the only one out of the supporting characters that seems to have a clue about that throughout the entire movie is the character of Igor.
Yes.
Which is why that there's a very strong what's the word? Chemistry that he has with Anora throughout the story. It's very strange and off-putting at times, but it has a very natural progression by the third act. There's a moment that I wanted to mention about Taurus particularly where I think probably my favorite scene in the movie is the scene where everybody's together and they go to the courthouse. They get to the courthouse and it's just like most of the scenes during that second act of the movie, it's very uncut gems and classic Sean Baker where characters are just shouting and talking over each other and a lot of the dialogue is incomprehensible, and just the moment where they reveal we're here to get this marriage annulled, and the judge is just like, you can't annul a marriage in New York that was done in Los Angeles, and Taurus in Las Vegas, and Taurus just stands up and goes, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me right now?
Why wouldn't you get married in New York? What's wrong with New York?
And just that reaction that he has is just like, the perfect, like, he's been trying to do everything to get this thing together, and then he finds out it was all for nothing, and he just loses his mind in this courthouse, and I laughed so hard. And then right after that, Ivan just goes up to the stand, he's like, I am intoxicated. It's absolute chaos.
Yes.
And completely off the rails, and I love that section of, like, we can barely talk about any of these scenes without laughing.
Yeah, Torres has a ton of great moments.
Torres is like just a standout comedic performance so much. The while you're just watching Annie just look so exhausted and tired of all this bullshit.
Yes.
And it's comedy gold. It's constant comedy gold.
There's one moment when Garnick is just sick because he got kicked in the head by Annie, and so he's probably concussed, and he takes Igor's grandmother's medicine for a headache, but he takes too much, and he has a negative reaction to it. And while they're driving in Torres's truck, Garnick violently vomits on himself, and everyone is like looking disgusted, and it's like, so much vomit that, and it's just oozing like
down his fucking,
it's not a little,
his nice ass clothes too.
It is just
like chunks and chunks.
It's disgusting. And you
and
they cut to them being at a gas station, and Torres is trying to clean out the truck, and he's like, my wife has to drive this truck tomorrow.
And they're just like, it smells like shit in this truck.
There's another scene where they're at a restaurant, and they're trying to find Ivan's friends to see if Ivan's friends knows his whereabouts, and Ivan is trying to, like, asking Annie if or whoever if they have a picture of Ivan, and they're trying to find the best picture of Ivan they can, and Garnick just says, why don't you look on Instagram? And Torres is like, I don't have an Instagram. I'm a fucking adult. and he finally gets a picture of Ivan, and he just goes around the restaurant and asking, hey, I'm looking for a little boy. He's sick, and I'm trying to find him. He's lost and sick. And he goes around and shows a picture of all these old Russian people who are just having dinner at this restaurant. And it's a 21-year-old man. It was Ivan, right? And he's so desperate. He's like, the whole movie, Torres is saying, I'm so fucked. Yep. So they've almost given up finding Ivan. They're at this restaurant, and Torres is just so hopeless that now at this random restaurant, he's gone around with Ivan's picture and just showing random people at the restaurant that we don't even know if Ivan's been there. Like, have you seen this man? Like, just going around at this restaurant. And he talks to some other Armenians at a table, I guess, and he's like just upset that they don't want to talk to him. It's like, that's what's wrong with this generation. They don't respect their elders. Yeah. They're lazy. They don't give a fuck. And he just goes on this rant out of frustration.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there's like, I want to. How long have we been talking about this movie?
Well, I mean, about the movie or just
this entire review.
An hour and 6 minutes.
Oh my god! So like, we should probably wrap this up soon, but we got to talk about the third act.
Yes.
And I want to mention something that happened right when the movie ended in this theater, and. So I was almost going to mention the tow truck scene in this part, because there's just so many crazy things that happen in the second act that are just completely worth talking about. But we gotta wrap this up.
Yeah.
So the third act is really where it all culminates, and it really emphasizes that chemistry that had been happening under the surface between Anora and Igor. And it all comes to a head. They have this brilliant exchange of dialogue when they're just sitting on a couch, smoking some cigarettes together, watching TV, and Igor is tasked with just kind of looking over Annie for this family for this until the annulment is finalized. And they're having this brilliant conversation. It's beautiful. And they're talking about like what Annie's expectations were about the way that Igor had been handling the situation, because he was kind of roughing her up and being just a henchman for this family. And the conversation has a lot of interesting conversations about the dynamics between men with power and women that just do not have any power. And then we cut to the scene where they're, the annulment is finalized and the final words are shared with Annie and the family. And Igor demands that Ivan apologize to Annie.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the moment where the mother steps in and says those horrible, horrible things to Annie.
She says, "My son apologizes to no one."
Yep. And then Annie claps back with just saying that, like, your son is a nobody. He's a terrible human being. And one of the best reactions in this movie is Ivan's dad in the background.
Yeah.
Dies of laughter at everything that Annie just has to say about his son.
Well, Annie's exact words are, your son hates you so much that he married a whore to upset you, basically, to piss you off.
Yep.
And Ivan's dad, who's just been very stoic the whole time, very reserved and resigned, he just lets out a big laugh because he's right. It's like, that's what's happened.
Yep. Because it's like he sees what's happening because, like you said, he's been so stoic. And that moment got one of the biggest laughs in my theater of the entire movie, of just his reaction laughing to that. And it was perfect.
Yeah.
And then the movie wraps up with a very interesting scene where at one point in the movie, Taurus had requested that Annie give back this very expensive ring that had been proposed to her with by Ivan. And he reveals that he still had it, and he gives it back to her. And at that moment, there's a brilliant final shot in this movie of the snow falling on the outside of the car, and Annie gets on top of Igor, and they begin to engage in sex. Before they stop, she just breaks down crying. Cut to black.
Yeah. And
brilliant ending.
It is, because... sorry.
I'm going to let you finish, but right as that happened, people start filtering out of the theater, and these two girls stand up, walk in front of me and my partner, and they just go, "That was so anticlimactic." And I was like, what?
What more did you want?
Literally.
Like, I don't know what else could have happened.
And that just kind of reminded me of, like, what you were saying about, like, the way Taurus was, like, going off and everything at one point in the movie. But I was just like, I'm not going to be that pretentious guy that just says you didn't get it. But I think you said it best, where, what more did you want? Yeah.
To me, I actually thought it was brilliant.
I thought it was brilliant.
Sorry,
I just felt like I was mocking you.
I thought it was brilliant.
I thought it was brilliant. So anticlimactic.
I'm Romanus and I talk like this. No, I shouldn't say my full name, but whatever. Who cares? So, how I interpret the end of the movie is that the only times where Annie actually felt powerful or felt like she was in control was when she was using her sexuality, with clients, with Ivan, and she is using her sexuality to get money, to keep her lifestyle going, no matter what it is. And so for 2/3 of the movie, her sexuality doesn't matter. We see that she's just, again, butterfly in the hurricane, and there's no amount of pleading or reason with these people. And she is powerless. Her marriage is annulled. She goes back to her house in Coney Island, where she is going to live with her sister. She's going to have to face the embarrassment and probably go back to the same strip club that she just bragged about marrying a millionaire. And she feels embarrassed. And so when she gets this ring back from Igor, it's almost like an impulse that she just decides to have sex with him, because that's the only time where she felt in control.
Exactly.
And maybe that's the realization she has when she starts crying and Igor just holds her. It's just been
this constant exploitation of her throughout this entire movie.
Yeah.
And she's recognizing the fact that it's like she doesn't actually need to do that. There's this person that was showing her actual humility for the first time in this entire story.
Who sees her humanity.
Exactly. And she doesn't need to repay that with what everybody exploits her with. I drew a lot of parallels in this movie to one of the most popular characters from a favorite show of ours, Industry. Yasmin.
Yasmin, yes.
Which we'll be doing a recording on that next week. But despite the difference is ultimately is that Yasmin was very much wealthy, but is always constantly having to exploit herself and her own sexuality to gain favor from a lot of her clients. And Annie is the same way in that. And that ending and that catharsis of her realizing that she doesn't need to be doing this, that this person is just showing her actual humility and doesn't expect anything in return, especially not her sexuality. Just, she breaks down crying, and then the movie ends.
Yeah.
And it's a very beautiful and humbling moment, honestly, and a very, very strong note to end this movie on.
It was definitely sobering, because of course everyone has sexuality, but unfortunately, well, not even unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that her sexuality is coupled with sex work, and that's just, for a lot of people, that's what they're gonna resign her to. And a character like Yasmin, who is very beautiful, and is allowed to be flirtatious, she can still navigate high society because her sexuality is coupled with opulence. Like, she speaks multiple languages, and she's been to fancy schools. So even though she could be probably just as promiscuous as a woman like Annie, it doesn't matter because the sexuality is just tied to just different social standards. And so, man, it's in a lot of ways, it's a modern tragedy. It almost reminds me of like one of those Greek comedies that's really not even a comedy. It's just tragic.
There was almost Greek comedy. There was almost a Shakespearean element during that second act of the movie, where it just feels like it goes from a Midsummer Night's Dream to a comedy of errors, and then it just ends up, like you said, being some sort of a Greek tragedy in the end. And I loved this movie.
Yeah, honestly, I would see it again.
I actually really want to see this movie again. I think there's a lot more to unpack from it. I think there's a lot more thoughts to be given on it. This movie comes with my highest recommendation this year. I think it's one of the year's finest films, one of the decade's finest films, honestly. Go see it.
Yes.
Go see it. I mean, if you've made it this far, you've probably seen the movie because we were talking about a lot of the details of what happens, but what do you think? You recommend this one? Yeah,
1,000%.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite movies of the year so far.
Yeah.
We're closing out the year, but it'll probably be in my top 3.
I think so. Yeah,
it's a great mirror to how we see people, not just sex workers, but and to our own hypocrisy.
Facts.
How, like, for a lot of people, even if you're not a sex worker, the truth is you are closer to the main character Annie in proximity to your socioeconomic standing than to these Russian oligarchs. You know, like, really, we really, yeah, it just in a lot of ways it humanized. It was a fantastic movie, and I really recommend it.
Yeah. Very well said, my friend.
Well, because we're running out of time.
Very well said, my friend. Well, we both highly recommend Anora. It's one of the best movies of the year. Go check it out. Go see it with a crowd if you can. If not, it's just as enjoyable on your own. Get some friends, maybe. I don't know. Just go see it. It's a great, great, great movie. And so we're going to be back next week. We're going to be talking a little bit more about some, I don't want to sound pretentious, higher caliber films because we're getting into award season, but this is a contender. This is a big contender, I think, for a lot of big recognition from some of the awards.
You mean The Watchers wasn't high cinema?
Oh, well, who knows, you know?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Man, people might feel differently in 100 years about The Watchers.
Of course, you know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I doubt it.
Me too.
Well, from both of us, thank you for coming back. As always, this was a good episode. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed talking about this movie. My name is Davis Leaf. This is the Loose Leaf Media Podcast. Did this with my co-host,
Romanus.
and we will see you all next week.
Bye.
Take care.